Hello everyone, welcome to the Budget Sportsman. I am super excited about today's video. This is a video I've actually been working on for quite some time. Today we're going to be reviewing / comparing these 5 different brands of budget-friendly binoculars, especially geared toward hunting with a hunting mindset. I've been using these binoculars now for the last couple of months, comparing them out in the woods, taking them out glassing, comparing them in a hunting situation, glassing the fields and that kind of thing. Got a lot of information to share with you, so if I'm glancing over to the side here, please forgive me. I just got some notes set over here that will help me keep on track and remember the things that I wanted to say. Let's go ahead and talk first about the criteria that I use to pick these binoculars, and then we'll go through the individual models. First of all these are 10 by 42 binoculars. If you're not familiar, the first number, the 10, is the amount of magnification. You call them 10 power binoculars. You can get them in 8, you can get 10, you can get 12, you can get 15s. The higher the magnification, obviously you're going to be able to see things further away more clearly, more zoomed in, but the more magnification, the more that you get a lot of handshake, and they're going to be difficult to use. For my application, my experience, I really enjoy the 10 power binoculars. The second number, that's by the 42, is basically how big this objective lens is, which has to do with how much light comes in and a lot of different factors like that. I decided to go with all 10 by 42s, keep everything even. A lot of these models are available in different power and objective lens size. My other requirement was that they were to be under $200. A few of these actually have retail values right around $200, but that's really not the real world value. So most of these you're going to be able to get for $150 and less. Now you may say that doesn't sound like much of a budget pair of binoculars to me. Well, I'll tell you why I went with the price range I did. For quite a few years now, I've been using these Bushnell binoculars. I think they were around $50, and to be honest, I've just not been satisfied with them at all. And I'll talk more about that in a moment as well. But that's the reason why I wanted to step up just a little bit. And we've got binoculars that still do range, I think, on this end from about $50 to $75 all the way up to binoculars that are about $150 in the real world. So let's go from left to right here. Let's talk about each individual model and what we're looking at. Right here we have the Vortex Crossfire HDs. These are going to run you about $150. Now these are a pretty new model, so I have not, at least in my experience, found prices much less than that by shopping around. If you do see a price that's much less than that, just beware. They might be the older Crossfires which do not have the HD designation. These are the Crossfire HDs, again, running right about $150 on most sites. Next we have the Leupold BX1 Mackenzies. These right now, last time I looked, are about $140, I think, on Amazon. Again, these actually have a retail value over $200, but that's just not the real world price that I found. I have even seen these on sale from time to time for down closer to $100 to $125. Again, the Leupold BX1 Mackenzies, be aware, I did recently see a pair in Walmart that had the same exact designation as far as the BX1 Mackenzies, but they were black instead of this gray color. And I'm guessing they were an older model. This seems to be the current model of the BX1 Mackenzies. Next up, we have the Vanguard Vestas. This is a company I'm not quite as familiar with, but I've been excited to try them out. These are running currently on Amazon right around $130. Next, we have the Nikon ProStaff 3S binoculars, and these are currently $125, $130 on Amazon. I will also say that I found some really good deals on these on eBay, so if you're willing to go used or maybe not direct from a retailer, you might be able to find some really good deals on eBay for much less. And finally, down here we have the Celestron Outland X binoculars. These, I think, currently on Amazon are $50. I think their retail value is around $85, so you're going to find them somewhere in that ballpark. These, again, are another company I'm not as familiar with, but I do have a few good things to say about them. Right off the bat, let me just say that the Vortex, the Leupold, and the Nikons I purchased with my own money for this review. The Vanguards and the Celestron were sent to me, so I just want to give you full disclosure on that. But I just want to say right from the outset that binos are really going to be very personal. The more I've played with these, the more I've realized how personal it can be to try to get that right fit and that right view that you want through your binoculars. So instead of doing this with a scoring system like I've done in some different reviews and comparisons in the past, I'm just going to point out some pros and cons of some different binoculars. I'm not going to try to necessarily rate the #1 winner of this whole review. I'm just going to try to give you some things that I noticed as I've been comparing these. What I really recommend to you is getting out to a store and actually trying them out. If you can get to a Walmart, have some, or go to a bigger store like Cabela's where they might have a bigger selection of binoculars, and really try them out in the store. See how they feel in your hands, see how they look looking through them, play with the eye cups, play with the focus, feel how they feel in your hands, and that's going to give you the best idea. One thing I did want to mention is a lot of you might be wondering, why not include Bushnell? Bushnell is readily available. They do have some very budget-friendly binoculars. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I just have not had good success with this pair of Bushnells I've had. I've had these for quite a few years, and I've never really had good success. And to be honest with you, a lot of folks in my family have the exact same pair and model of binoculars, and they've not been happy either. So if it was just one pair, I would say, well, maybe I just got a fluke. But a lot of folks that I've talked to that have this pair of binoculars have not been happy. There's some issue with trying to get it to focus with both eyes open, and it seems to just really be an issue with this pair of binoculars. That is why I did not include Bushnells, because of my past bad experience. However, I will say that recently I was in Walmart and I picked up a pair of Bushnell binoculars that were more in line with the price of these binoculars, around that $150 mark. Just looking at them in the store, I was actually really impressed. But at that point, I had already used up my entire budget for this video. But if for some reason you're not happy with any of the options here, you might want to take a look at the Bushnell Legend E series. Seemed really nice just from my very limited look at them. Let's go ahead and start off the comparison of these different models by talking about weight. Now, for a lot of us, the weight is probably not going to be a huge factor. But if you're in the backcountry a lot, you're hiking way back in, you're doing a lot of scouting where you're walking miles and miles, whatever the case may be, you may be counting every ounce, and this may be important to you. Now, let me say that these measurements that I got on my scales are slightly different in some cases than the advertised weight. I did measure all of these with no accessories whatsoever, no lens caps, no covers, no straps, just bare binoculars. Over here on the left we have, or my left, we have the Vortex Crossfires. They came in at 23.3 ounces. It's actually the heaviest model we have in the lineup. Then we have the Leupold BX1 Mackenzie's at 21.4 ounces, the Vanguard Vesta 21.1, the Nikon Pro Staff at 20.4, and then the Celestron Outland X at 21 ounces. Let's be honest, there's only a 3-ounce difference between the Nikon Pro Staff, which come in at the lightest, 20.4 ounces, and the Vortex Crossfires at 23.3. So again, very little difference, but if every ounce matters, then probably you're going to be looking at something like the Nikons, which come in at 20.4 ounces. Next up in the comparison, let's talk about ergonomics. Now, I've already mentioned that to me, finding a pair of binoculars that you really like is going to be a very personal thing. And so this is just my personal opinion. The one that I don't like, you might pick up and think it feels great in your hands, all depending on the size of your hands and just the shape of your hands, what you feel like you like. Personally, when I pick up the Vortex optics, they have a nice feel. They've got some nice little indentations back here for your thumbs. They have a fairly smooth, continuous flow to them, and I feel like they're fairly slim in their diameter. They feel really nice in my hands. I really enjoy them. I would say I also feel fairly similarly about the Nikon Pro Staff. They have a nice rubberized feel to them, and I would say they would be a close second. To be honest with you, while the Leupolds are some of the more expensive binoculars in this review, my very first initial impression upon picking them up out of the box is that they just felt bulky. Again, they have little thumb indentations back here, and I've gotten a little bit used to them, but they just definitely have a little bit bulkier feel. The next category that I want to talk about, it's going to fall under the ergonomics of the binoculars and how they really function, is going to be the focus knob. Let's start with the Vortex Crossfires. They have a pretty decent feel to them as far as the texture and being able to get them to turn. That's pretty good. I like that. One thing that I'll mention is it feels like the very tiny amount of play or change in resistance when you're changing directions. Certainly not as bad as some of the other models, but it is there. It is noticeable. But I would say overall it's fairly smooth and consistent. On the BX1 Mackenzie's, they have a little bit more aggressive of a texture on the knob. I actually really like that. One thing I've noticed about these is that they're very easy to turn. There's very little resistance. There's a part of me that likes that. I'm sure they're going to be easier to turn in cold weather with gloves on and that kind of thing. But the one thing that I do notice is that it feels a little bit sloppy to me. There's still that change of resistance in the middle when you're changing directions. And to me, it just takes a little bit of getting used to. Again, if you're looking for something super easy to turn, if you have trouble turning some stiffer models, this one's super easy to turn. To me, it makes it just feel a little bit sloppy and a little bit like I need a little bit more resistance when I'm hunting for that perfect focus and I'm changing directions. On the opposite end of the spectrum here, you have the Vanguard Vestas. I would say these probably have one of the stiffer focus knobs of these different models, but I would also say it's one of the smoothest. There's very little change in resistance when you're changing directions back and forth in focus. Moving on to the Nikons, I would say that they actually have a very, very smooth focus wheel. I would say, again, like most of the others, there's a very slight change in resistance or a very slight little bit of play in the middle when you're changing directions. But overall, I would say the Nikons have a very smooth focus wheel. It does have a little bit less aggressive of texturing on the knob than some of the others, but overall, very nice. Now moving on to the Celestrons. And this is an area where I think the Celestrons actually really shine. They actually have a very smooth focus wheel, very little change in resistance. And there's something I wanted to point out about the Celestrons. There's a few models that when you go to change the focus from far away to close, it takes very, very little movement of the focus wheel. Now the advantage of that is that you can change focus from far away to close very quickly, very easily, without taking your finger off the knob and repositioning or anything like that. One thing I noticed about the Celestrons is that it takes more movement of this knob to be able to change focus from far away to close or close to far away. Now, this may be an advantage or disadvantage. Personally, I found that I like it. What it means is that it's a little bit easier for me to have fine-tuned control to get that perfect focus. I'm not going, oops, I went a little bit too far. Oops, I need to go back. Oops, I'm going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. With this, I can slow down and just creep right up to that perfect focus, and I found that I really like that. Again, there is a disadvantage if you're in a big hurry and you need to go from something very close to very far away. It's going to take a little bit longer to focus, but overall, it has a nice aggressive texture to it. It's very smooth, and I do like the speed at which it focuses. Let's move on to talking about eye cups. If you don't know, eye cups are these twist up pieces where your eyes go, and it helps you get the perfect distance from your eyes to get the clearest image possible. I don't need to say a lot about this, but one thing I want to mention is that the Celestrons, the Nikons, and the Vestas all have click up eye cups. In other words, they kind of pop into place with various positions. They have different numbers of positions, but each one has a place where they click into place. Not a hard click, but just you can feel a little indentation. The Vortex and the Leupold models do not. It's a very smooth turn all the way up. There's no indentations, there's no clicks. Now, let me just point out the advantages of each, and I think it's totally a personal preference. I think the advantage of the models that don't have any places to click in is that you can move it to the exact perfect position. You're not kind of locked into certain preset options. You can get that exact perfect position for you. The disadvantage to me is that almost all of these, when you put the caps back in, you put them back in their case, whatever, it's very easy to push these eye cups back down. So when you pull them out, now they're no longer in the correct position. The thing I like about the models that have the click in position is that I know, okay, with the Nikons, I need to go up one click on each side. Done. I know it's in the exact same place every time. With another model, it's 2 clicks up. So I can get back to that perfect position. Whereas on these, if they get pushed down, it might be a little bit harder to find that exact spot. Let me also mention that none of these have locking eye cups. So in other words, you can't lock them into their place so that they don't get pushed down. That would be a feature you'd probably find on higher end models, but not available on any of these on the table today. One more thing I want to quickly mention under the design of these different binoculars is the ability to mount to a tripod. Now, for a lot of us on the East Coast, we've never heard of that or even thought of mounting binoculars to a tripod, but I know for a lot of you guys out west who glass for hours on end, that's something that's really important to you to be able to mount to the tripod and get a good, stable platform. Believe it or not, all of these binoculars do have the ability to mount to a tripod except for the Nikons. They do not have the 1/4 threads up front here to mount to a tripod. Again, a lot of you, it's not going to be important, but if that's a deal breaker to you, then the Nikons are certainly going to be out of the question. This is one of the areas where Nikon falls short. I feel like they have some great things that I'm going to have to say about them in a little bit, but this is one area where they definitely fall short. The next category that I want to go over here and compare is the accessories. I realize that for a lot of us, if you've had cheaper binoculars before, one of the things you've probably found is that the accessories that came with them were not great. Maybe you ended up throwing them in a bin or throwing them in a box somewhere or even throwing them away and never really using them. In this lineup, there are a couple of models that actually come with really useful, usable accessories, and I want to point that out. So let's go ahead and compare them one by one. Okay, on the accessory category, let's get started with the Vortex Crossfire HDs. And in my opinion, in this category of accessories, the Vortex Crossfires are the hands down winner. With your purchase of the Crossfire HDs for no additional charge, you are going to get this glass pack binocular harness. Now, as I've already mentioned, a lot of times you're going to get a pair of binoculars with a very cheap case that is just not going to be practical or usable. This is a very usable harness and case. I found that for hiking long distances, a lot of scouting, I really love it. I've used the regular harness in the past that's just free hanging, but I find that they bounce against my stomach or my chest and I end up just not feeling very comfortable. These, they stay nice and snug, easy access to my binoculars right here. I don't have them hooked up right now, but they do have these straps that you can hook up. So if you need to just drop your binoculars without putting them back in the case for a quick shot, something like that, they have that as well. Really found that I like this glass pack harness. It's got this little elastic closure down here, so it's nice and silent. Again, this is not intended to be a review of this harness. I'm just going to tell you that I really, really do like the glass pack harness that's included. Very useful accessory that's included in the box. Now, in addition to the glass pack harness, you're also going to get this nice neck strap. It's kind of a stretchy, flexible, padded material. You can put it around your neck. If you're my size, it still does work, I would say, for an under the arm if you want to use that for target shooting and that kind of thing. It is just barely long enough for that purpose, so if you're maybe a bigger guy, it's probably not going to work for that. Now, there's one last reason why I feel like the Vortex Crossfires are just a hands-down winner in the accessory category, if what I've showed you is not enough already. And that's because I've noticed that while what I just showed you is what normally comes with your binoculars, I've noticed certain sellers are offering additional bonus items. I've seen different sellers who maybe offer a free Vortex hat or other items. I purchased mine from the website bnhphoto.com, and they actually included, for no additional price, a regular Vortex binocular harness. This is not the kind with the pouch like I just showed you. This is the kind that are free hanging, more of the elastic style straps. I believe this is a $20 value, and that was included with my purchase for no extra fee, as well as this little flashlight. I guess it would be a little keychain flashlight, about a $10 value that was included as well. Pretty bright little light. So there's another $30 of value that from B&H Photo was included for free. Go ahead and check out that website if you're interested in buying the Vortex Crossfires. Last time I checked, they were still offering these accessories as a bundle and the same price as most other sellers. So go ahead and check that out. Let's move on to the Leupold BX1 Mackenzies. Now, on the Leupolds, you're gonna get a very nice neck strap here. It's got some good padding to it, and the thing that I really like about it is that the strap actually slides through this padded sleeve. So if it's on your neck or around your shoulder, the binoculars can move a little bit without having to actually slide the padded part across your shoulders, and you can keep that pad in place. The other thing I like is how they adjust. There's actually a buckle on each end, and the straps double up, so they go like this. And what that does is it gives you an incredible amount of adjustability without having a bunch of extra straps and flaps laying over. This is a super clean, neat design without a bunch of stuff laying around. What that does is it means you can shorten it up nice and tight for around your neck, but it will go plenty long enough to go over your shoulder if you want to wear it under your arm. Now, this is nowhere near as long as it will go, and the binoculars are already hanging down around my belt line, and you can get it much longer if you need to. So if you're a bigger guy, you want to wear it under your arm like this, then these are going to be a great option. I also want to mention that their attachment system, the way the strap mounts to the binoculars, is super slick. I really like it. It does have these quick little buckle disconnects as well, so that's a great option. Looking at the case, this is actually a pretty nice case. It has a silent closure here with the elastic similar to the Vortex. One thing that Leupold has done that Vortex did not is they've added this little adjustment back here so you can tighten it up. If this little elastic starts to stretch out or something, you can readjust that and make sure you've got a perfect fit. The one downside is that you're not going to be able to mount these to a harness like the Vortexes, but they do have these straps back here, which I guess would work for your belt loop or for MOLLE attachment, something like that would, I think, make a nice little pouch in that regard. So I feel like Leupold has done a great job with the accessories. Moving on to the Vanguard Vestas, really from this point out on the rest of the models, there's really not a whole lot notable here. I do like the pouch that's included with the Vanguard Vestas. It's very nice, form-fitted shape. It is a Velcro closure, and it also does have a belt loop on the back. The strap that comes with it is a very simple strap. There's no padding to it. It is plenty long enough to go over your shoulder, but again, the way it attaches, you're gonna have some tag ends depending on how you have it adjusted. Moving on to the Celestrons. Celestron has done something different here. They actually have a zippered pouch. It's a nice little pouch. I like it. A little bit padded. It's got a nice pocket on the front here. One thing to note is that this belt loop back here is not very large, so it's probably not going to work if you have a really super wide belt. The neck strap is plenty long, but again, There's no padding at all. Finally, under the accessory category, let's talk about the Nikon ProStaff 3S binoculars. I feel like in this category, Nikon really failed. As mentioned, there's some things I really like about these binoculars. Accessories is not one of them. These objective lens covers, I don't know, they're just the worst of any of them. This case, it's Velcro, which is fine. Others are as well, but it just seems like it's oversized for the binoculars. I don't know if they use them for multiple different models or something, but it's just, I don't know, as you can see, I've got a whole lot of space up here that's not really filled with the binoculars. I'm not really thrilled about that at all. It does have a belt loop on the back here. And also with the strap, it's similar to the others in that it's no padding, but this one's fairly short. I just don't think that you would be able to use it under the arm like some of the others. So really, to me, Nikon, sorry, but you came in last place in the accessory category. One other brief point that I want to make here is that all of these binoculars are rated as being waterproof and fog-proof and nitrogen filled. Okay, so let's start talking about image quality. I'm sure it's something that most of you are super interested in. Which one is going to give you the best view through the binoculars? Now, let me just start by saying one of the factors that gives you the clarity of the image, the color of the image, the contrast of the image, is the coating that the manufacturer puts on the glass. Now, this is a complicated topic, and I'm not going to even begin to try to really explain it here. But one of the things you'll see is coated, which usually means that there's a single layer of coating. You'll see multi-coated, which means there's multiple layers of coating, but it might mean that it's only on certain of the glass surfaces. And then usually you'll see fully multi-coated, which should mean that they put multiple layers of coating on every glass surface in the binoculars. Now, that's a very feeble understanding, a very feeble explanation. But with that background, let me just say that the Vortex, the BX1 Mackenzie's from Leupold, and the Vanguard Vestas all are listed as being fully multi-coated, whereas the Nikon ProStaff and the Celestron Outland X binoculars are both listed as being multi-coated, not fully multi-coated. Again, I don't know how much difference that's going to make to you, but I just wanted to point that out. Now let's start talking about what you get when you're looking through the binoculars and how these binoculars function. The first thing that I want to mention is the close focus distance. Now, for a lot of us, it's probably not going to be a big factor. I just want to point it out quickly, and I'll throw the numbers up on screen here. But basically what it is the distance, the closest distance that those binoculars can focus. So none of these can focus 2 feet in front of the binocular. The Vortex Optics Crossfire HDs are the winner in this category as far as close focus distance, with a close distance of 6 feet. The next thing I want to talk about quickly is the field of view. Basically, field of view is how wide your vision is when looking through the binoculars, and it's going to play a direct relation to how easily you're going to be able to pick up and find that deer because of how much area you're covering. Normally, field of view is measured in the distance across that's in your field of view at a distance from you at 1,000 feet. So in other words, go out 1,000 feet, look at that spot, and how wide is your field of view. The Nikons are the clear winners in this category with a very surprising 367 feet. This blows the competition out of the water, and this is one of the areas where I think the Nikons really do shine with that very large field of view, easy to pull up and get your target in focus. Quite a distance ahead of even the number 2 competitor here at 325 feet, I believe it is, for the Vortexes. And then the rest are actually down around or below 300. Again, I'll have the numbers up on screen. Hey everyone, as you can see, I moved inside. I wasn't quite able to finish up everything I wanted to do last time, and the weather has now turned cold. We've been getting some snow. Today is in the mid-teens, and so I'm certainly not going to sit outside to finish this review. I decided to finish it in here in the studio. The last thing I want to talk to you about is the image quality of the binoculars. Is there actually any difference in the clarity or the clearness of each image as you look through? Now, I had this elaborate plan here to put each pair of binoculars on the tripod adapter and then use this adapter with the phone to be able to take images or pictures or videos through each pair of binoculars. And in fact, I did that 2 or 3 different times. But what I felt like was that I was getting inconsistent results. There's too many variables, trying to get the phone lined up just perfectly to get the best, clearest image. There were times when there would be a glare off the front lens of this binocular here and back into the lens of the camera, creating additional glare. You had problems with the image quality, and then there was also the issue of making sure that the focus was absolutely perfect between the focus on the binoculars as well as the focus on the phone. And what I felt like was I was probably not going to be able to give a really super fair view for each of these pairs of binoculars. If I got one perfectly focused, it would look great, but maybe another one is equal quality. But if I messed up the setup a little bit, that would reflect negatively on that pair of binoculars. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm not going to show you that. I don't want to give you any kind of false ideas, and I'm just going to give you my personal opinions and preferences on these different pairs of binoculars, and you're just going to have to take it as a single reference point because I think that this is highly personal. One thing that I should mention right off the bat is I expected there to be a large difference across the board, that I would maybe find one that just stood out as being absolutely the clearest, the brightest image, the best image, but I really struggled. Many days I would sit with all these binoculars and I would look at one, I would look at another and try to figure out which one is better. And to be really honest, I had a hard time. I think in this price range, you're probably going to get pretty consistent results. Obviously, these are not going to be top of the line. There's binoculars that cost twice as much as these binoculars here, or even 10 times as much as these binoculars here. And there's a reason for that. I think you are probably going to find some binoculars with better quality than these, but in this price range, they seem pretty consistent. Let's go through each individual pair of binoculars and talk a little bit about what I did notice in the image quality department. Starting with the Vortex Crossfire HDs, I feel like I went back and forth on these. There were days that I felt like I couldn't quite get them in focus, and there are days that I just felt like they were super clear. I think one thing that I found is that with these, it really made a difference exactly where I had those eye cups, and it also mattered exactly how I had them spaced between the two sides of your binoculars. I think that's called the IPD, or interpupillary distance, something like that. But anyways, that made a big difference. If I got it all right, I felt like these were really super clear. One thing I'm going to mention throughout all these binoculars is color, chromatic aberration, or color fringing, I guess we could call it. And that's where you have a light part of the image and a dark part of the image that contrast against each other. And at that contrasting point, you get some color distortion, you get some purple fringing and things like that. I did some testing up against a 3D target, and a lot of times you would see it around the white part of the antlers of this 3D target, or around the white belly. You would see some of that color fringing. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The Vortexes were one of the pairs that I think did fairly well as having minimal color fringing. Still had some, but more minimal than some of the other pairs. One area that I think the Vortexes did kind of fall a little bit short was on edge-to-edge clarity. So in the middle is super clear, but as you're looking through the view, the outer edges kind of fade off and go out of focus or get a little bit blurry. I didn't find it to be a huge issue. Again, keeping in mind that the Vortexes have a little bit of a wider field of view than some others, so it kind of keeps that blurriness out to the sides of that field of view. But it is definitely noticeable, especially if you kind of shift your eyes around and look out toward that edge of that field of view. Moving on to the Leupold Mackenzie BX1 binoculars here. I think these were probably one of the top performers in image quality. There were days when I felt like these were even, and then there were days that I thought this would win, one day that I thought this would win. But I feel like one thing that this did better than the Vortexes is it seemed like the edge-to-edge clarity was a little bit better. You still kind of got that fade off toward the edges, but it seemed like it was a little bit less noticeable, a little bit less drastic than on the Vortexes. Again, you did have some color fringing, but it seemed very minimal. Again, a good clear image through the Leupold binoculars. One thing that I noticed, as I mentioned earlier in the review, is that this focus knob is very easy to turn, and I felt like sometimes that caused me to have a hard time getting the perfect focus, like it was just too easy to move too far. And so for that element, sometimes hard to get that clear image, but once you got it, very clear. Moving on to the Vanguard Vestas here, one thing I noticed that really surprised me is that I think this pair of binoculars here probably did the best as far as that edge-to-edge clarity. In some of the pictures I did take through the phone adapter there, it seemed like that clarity just went all the way out to the edge. Really surprised me from Vanguard, but I definitely say in that category, the Vanguards did the best. The Vanguards did show a little bit more of that color aberration, that chromatic aberration, the color fringing than some of the other binoculars, but other than that category, I would say they're holding up on par with the Vortex and the Leupold binoculars. Moving on to the Nikon ProStaff 3S binoculars, I think I mentioned before in the review, if I haven't already, I'll do it again. These binoculars surprised me as well. It seemed like every time I picked up these binoculars, it was super easy to get a nice, crisp, and clear image. Another thing to keep in mind is these have the widest field of view, which I think is part of the reason why it seemed so easy to get a clear image. Any kind of that edge distortion was so far out there, was such a wide field of view that it just seemed like you got a really nice clear picture through the middle. They definitely did have some of that color, chromatic aberration and color fringing, and some of the out of focus toward the edges. But the Nikons did surprise me in pretty good image quality. Finally, let's talk about the Celestron binoculars, keeping in mind here that this is the cheapest pair of binoculars on the table by half or even a third of what some of these other binoculars cost. So in some ways, I don't feel like it's really fair to Celestron to put them up against these other binoculars, but the truth is, I did feel like they performed fairly well. Again, keeping in mind they have maybe a lower quality coating than some of the others, and also keeping in mind that they have a narrow field of view at only 294 feet, as opposed to the Nikons, which I think is like 367. That's a pretty big difference. So the one category that I noticed that the Celestrons kind of struggled in was that edge-to-edge clarity. There was a definite out of focus edge, and it was larger than on some of the other models for sure. But again, keeping in mind this is a narrower field of view, so that out of focus or distorted edge is going to come more and more into your vision. As far as the color chromatic aberration and color fringing, these actually did pretty well and held up just fine against the competition. Okay, as I mentioned earlier in the review, I don't intend to score these binoculars and give you a grand winner. I think it's going to be a highly personal preference. I think you need to get into a store and check them out for yourself. But what I want to do here at the end is just go through each one and kind of give you some pros and cons and kind of my final thoughts on each pair. Starting with the Vortex Crossfire HDs, these binoculars impressed me in a couple of categories. One, as I already mentioned, was definitely the accessory category. Some great accessories, really appreciate that. Another category I think that they really impressed me in was the ergonomics. I just like the way they feel in my hands. Again, that's highly personal, exactly what you like, what you feel, the shape of your hands. But I really was impressed in the Vortex in those two categories. Moving on to the Mackenzie, the Leupold BX1 Mackenzie binoculars here. I think these are a fantastic, high-quality pair of binoculars for the price, especially if you can find them on sale like I did. But I'm not sure these are going to be for me. And here's why. I think a lot of it comes down to the ergonomics of these binoculars. I really like the texturing on here. It has a good, aggressive texturing. There's a lot of things to like. I think they look cool, like the color. They didn't go with just black. But they feel bulky in my hands. They just don't feel like I would want them to feel. And the focus knob just turns too easily for me. For some reason, it doesn't feel good to me. I think this is a super high quality pair of binoculars, and if they feel good to you and they look good to you, comes with some good accessories, I think this is a fantastic buy. Again, just not sure it's what really spoke to me. On to the Vanguard Vesta. These binoculars, again, keeping in mind that Vanguard sent them to me, I think they're a great pair of binoculars. Image quality holds up with any of the other ones on this table. The one thing that did stick out, again, was that edge-to-edge clarity that performed pretty well. If that's something that's bothered you in the past or has maybe something that is important to you, then I think this is going to be the pair of binoculars for you. To me, they just performed quite well in that particular category. But accessories, things like that, maybe aren't going to be up to par with some of these other ones in the same price point. Now on to Nikons. I've had a love-hate relationship with these Nikons since I pulled them out of the box. I love the way they feel, nice rubberized coating. As I mentioned, I feel like I can always throw them up to my face and get a nice, clear, crisp image. Really actually impressed with that as far as that goes. Couple of things that really take them down a notch. One is they don't have the higher end coating that some of these other models do. Is that a big deal? Probably not. But here are the things that do kind of bother me. The accessories, I am not at all impressed with these lens covers. Really disappointed in that. Already mentioned disappointed in the case. And it's the only pair of binoculars that does not have a tripod adapter. Now, honestly, that's not something I think I will use a lot, but I can see myself going out in a fall evening and trying to glass a field and wanting to put it on a tripod or a window adapter, something like that, where I can have the stability. And that just is kind of a strike against the Nikons. If you can find these maybe used or on eBay for a good price and they fit your budget, then I think you're really going to be happy with them if those little strikes against it are not big issues to you. Finally, let's look at the Celestrons. Keep in mind, these are the cheapest on the table by half or even a third of the price of some of the other models. You know, I feel like Celestron came in at a disadvantage. Being the cheapest on the table, you might expect them to perform under the rest. And you know, there are a few things that maybe they don't quite hold up to what the others are, but I will say this for Celestron. For a $50 pair of binoculars, they performed above my expectations. Truthfully, I've had $50 pair of binoculars before that to me were just horrid. These actually, I felt like, held up fairly well against the competition. I am not going to be able to tell you that they are as good as the Leopolds or the Vortexes, but I think that if you're on a budget and you can't afford $150, you're looking at $50, I think this is a pair of binoculars that maybe you should really consider. I hope this review has been helpful for you. If you're interested in any of these pairs of binoculars, let me remind you there will be links in the description to Amazon. If you purchase them through those links, it's a big help to this channel to be able to do more reviews just like this one. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down below. And until next time, remember to get off YouTube and get outdoors into God's great creation.